He sat in a modest parsonage in the English countryside, by candlelight, grappling with a thought so radical it might as well have come from the far future. What if a star's gravity could trap light itself? Before we dive deeper, tell me, what's the greatest idea you've heard that seemed impossible in its time? Leave your answer in the comments below. And if you believe truth deserves to shine, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Because today we uncover the mind who foresaw the void that swallows light. This is Pioneers in the Dark, and this is John Michell's story. In the winter of 1783, the winds whipped across the Yorkshire moors and rattled the windows of a small rectory in Thornhill. Inside, Reverend John Michell, once a Cambridge scholar and now a quiet clergyman, sat at his desk surrounded by manuscripts, telescopic sketches, and the weight of an idea no one around him seemed ready to grasp. He was neither flashy nor loud, an unassuming man, often described simply as ingenious by the few who met him. Yet he was about to touch the edge of what would become one of the greatest mysteries of the universe. Born in 1724 in the village of Eckring, Nottinghamshire, John Michell's early life gave little hint of cosmic ambition. His father was a squire, his upbringing comfortable, his education excellent. He studied at Queen's College, Cambridge, and graduated with honors. But the world of natural philosophy he entered was dominated by giants, Newton's gravity, light described as particles, mathematics blossoming into new tools. Michell immersed himself in it all. But his mind didn't settle for the standard explanation of night sky brilliance or the flicker of stars. He asked simple, devastating questions. What if light itself were prey to gravity? What if some stars were vanishing before our eyes, while most of his peers looked only up, wondering what stars were or how far? Michell looked deeper into what they could be becoming. In 1767, he used statistics to show that clusters of stars were real bound systems rather than random dots of light. He asked questions about gravity and mass that nudged the boundaries of science at the time. But among his greatest insights was the notion that a luminous body, under certain conditions, might become invisible. In a letter to Henry Cavendish, and later published in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, Michell proposed the existence of what he called dark stars. He calculated that if a body of the same density as the Sun were 500 times the radius of the Sun, its escape velocity would exceed the speed of light, meaning no light would escape and the body would be invisible. American Museum of Natural History. Imagine that. In 1783, when telescopes were crude mirrors and light itself was still debated as a wave or a particle, Michell dared to think of darkness not as mere absence but as presence, something so massive and hidden that it would hide itself. His method wasn't mystical, it was rigorous. He accepted Newton's corpuscular theory of light, the idea that light was made of particles, and Newton's law of gravity. Then he connected them. If gravity could slow down or trap those particles, then perhaps there existed bodies where light couldn't escape. In his own words, he writes that all light emitted from such a body would return towards it by its own proper gravity. SOTT.net. Yet his insight didn't spark the revolution it should have. While science was advancing, it lacked the tools, the language, the paradigm to celebrate what he had foretold. The idea of a star whose gravity trapped light was simply too ahead of its time. His paper, published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society, faded into obscurity. His dark stars were forgotten, even as stars were catalogued and classified. For many, Michell remained the quiet parson who dabbled in astronomy among his parish duties. But beneath his calm exterior lay perseverance unmatched. He built instruments, measured the mass of the earth, studied earthquakes, made magnets. He was not bound to one field, but to curiosity itself. Some historians say he was so far ahead of his scientific contemporaries that his ideas languished in obscurity. American Physical Society, the year 1783 was not just any year. It was a period of transition. Steam engines, newcomer, and Watt. Electricity being discovered. voyages across oceans. In this world, Michell looked up at the stars and asked not just what they were, but what they could hide. He calculated what no one else dared, that there could be invisible stars, dark masses around which light failed to escape. He further proposed that if a luminous companion orbited such an invisible star, the visible star's motion might betray the hidden partner. The Linda Hall Library picture him in his rectory library. Candle flame flickering, chalk dust swirling in lamplight. He draws diagrams, numbers, scribbles, if the semi-diameter of a sphere of the same density with the Sun were to exceed that of the Sun in the proportion of 500 to 1, and so on. That sentence, once obscure, prefigures the very concept of a black hole, an object from which no light escapes. MDP, I. But then, the world moved on. Gravity became its own field. Light was understood as wave, and telescopes improved. Yet Michell's paper remained hidden. He published other things, seismology, geology, optics. Yet his most profound insight remained unseen. He died in 1793, rector of Thornhill. In quiet obscurity, the ideas he planted buried under centuries. Wikipedia, and so the stage is set. A man of faith and science, sitting between rows of candlelit books and celestial charts. Publishing a radical hypothesis that the universe holds hidden darkness far beyond any telescope's reach. One could argue that every modern discovery of black holes, every image of a shadow in space, every wobble of a star around darkness, began with his quiet calculation. In the next part, we will follow Michell's midlife struggles, his genius in multiple fields, the scientific community's resistance, and how his dark star concept faded into silence until centuries later it resurfaced and changed how we view the cosmos. The moors outside Thornhill were quiet that spring, blanketed in mist that rolled in from the pennies. John Michell stood at the small window of his rectory, his hands clasped behind his back, the candlelight reflecting in his spectacles. He wasn't thinking of sermons or scripture that morning. His thoughts were somewhere beyond the stars, caught between faith and the infinite. In those days, science and religion weren't enemies. They were uneasy neighbors, sharing the same walls of mystery. To Michell, studying the heavens was not rebellion, it was reverence. Every number he calculated, every equation he wrote, was an act of worship, an attempt to decode the handwriting of creation. And yet, what he was about to propose seemed heretical to both the church and science alike. He began with gravity, Newton's great law that bound the universe together. Gravity, the invisible thread that pulled apples and planets alike. But Michell asked a question that Newton never dared to write. If gravity pulls everything, does it pull light as well? The thought was like lightning in his mind. If light were made of particles, as Newton believed, then, by all reason, those particles should be subject to gravity. That meant, at least in theory, a massive enough object could trap light entirely. A star so dense, so heavy, that even its brilliance would fall back upon itself. A body invisible to all eyes, not because it wasn't there, but because it held its own light hostage. He didn't stop there. With the precision of a mathematician and the intuition of a poet, Michell began to calculate. He imagined a star 500 times larger than our Sun, with the same density. He took the speed of light, 300,000 kilometers per second, and asked, at what point would escape velocity exceed that speed? When would light itself be unable to flee? The numbers on his parchment formed a bridge between the known and the unknowable. When he looked down at his final equation, his heart skipped. It was possible. He didn't call it a black hole. He couldn't. That language didn't exist yet. But in his mind's eye, he saw it clearly. A dark star, massive and silent, a celestial ghost hidden in plain sight. When he wrote to Henry Cavendish, one of the most brilliant minds of the age, he could hardly contain his excitement. If there should really exist in nature any bodies whose density is not less than the Sun, and whose diameters are more than 500 times the diameter of the Sun, he wrote, since their light could not arrive at us, ... We could have no information from sight. Cavendish admired the thought but offered no reply of awe, just quiet acknowledgement. The Royal Society published the paper, but it barely stirred the surface of the scientific world. The concept was too alien, too far ahead of its time. Most readers saw it as an intellectual curiosity, a clever mathematical exercise, not a revelation. Still, Michell pressed on. He had already built the first reflecting telescope with a segmented mirror, a precursor to the great observatories that would one day search the skies for the very things he imagined. He studied magnetism, measuring the attraction between iron bars. He explored earthquakes and even tried to predict their epicenters from wave motion, effectively founding the science of seismology. The man seemed to live in a perpetual state of discovery. Yet his greatest discovery lay buried under indifference. It's almost cruel how time works. Ideas don't always find the moment they deserve. Sometimes they arrive centuries early, like messages sent into the future, waiting for minds capable of understanding. By the late 1780s, Michell's health was fading. His wife had died soon after their marriage. His social circle was small. Yet his intellect burned undimmed. He corresponded with Joseph Priestley, Benjamin Franklin, and other luminaries of his time. They respected his mind, but his theories on invisible stars earned polite silence. Meanwhile, the rest of science moved elsewhere. In 1796, Pierre-Simon Laplace, the great French mathematician, independently suggested the idea of dark bodies in his exposition Du Système du Monde. But even Laplace's version vanished in later editions, quietly removed, dismissed as speculative fantasy. Michell's work sank deeper into the fog of forgotten papers. He died in 1793, buried in Thornhill churchyard, without fanfare, without recognition. He left behind no portrait, no preserved voice, just equations on aging paper and letters gathering dust. And yet, the universe remembered him. Because over a century later, Albert Einstein would publish his theory of general relativity. Space and time would no longer be flat but curved, bent by mass. And there, within Einstein's equations, would appear the shadow of Michell's idea. Carl Schwarzschild, in 1916, would calculate the exact radius at which light could no longer escape, the Schwarzschild radius, and, unknowingly, he would confirm the ghost of Michell's dark star. In a way, John Michell had predicted the mathematics of black holes before relativity existed. Before the word black hole was even born, his insight, long ignored, had become prophecy. But there's a strange kind of poetry in his obscurity. Michell didn't seek fame. He wasn't chasing applause. His ideas were born from solitude and faith, from the belief that understanding creation was a divine act in itself. He stared into the darkness of the universe and saw something no one else could. Not horror, but order. Not emptiness, but design. He once said, "The same power which causes the fall of an apple causes the fall of a star." In those words lies the entire story of modern astrophysics. As we look back now, we realize that what he offered was more than theory, it was vision. And it would take humanity 200 years to finally see what he saw that night by candlelight in Thornhill. For more than a century, John Michell's name lay buried under the dust of history. Mentioned in the footnotes of old journals, occasionally whispered by astronomers who had stumbled across his obscure 1783 paper. It was as if the universe itself had tucked his legacy away, saving it for a time when humanity could finally understand what he had seen through the veil of the unknown. Then came the 20th century, an age when science began to stretch its fingers toward the infinite. Einstein's equations had rewritten the cosmos. Suddenly, gravity wasn't just a pull, it was the very fabric of space bending under the weight of existence. And within that bending, physicists found something terrifyingly beautiful. The possibility that Michell's dark stars might not just be real, but everywhere. In 1916, Carl Schwarzschild, serving on the front lines of World War I, solved Einstein's field equations while shells exploded around him. In the muddy chaos of war, he calculated the point of no return, the event horizon. He died before he could see the impact of his work, but unknowingly he had drawn the mathematical boundary of a black hole. Michell's forgotten concept suddenly had a body. Decades passed. The name black hole wouldn't even exist until the 1960s. Astronomers like Subrahmanyan, Chandrasekhar, and John Wheeler would wrestle with its implications. Many resisted, just as they had resisted Michell's dark stars. The idea that light, the most sacred constant of the universe, could be trapped felt almost blasphemous. But the universe doesn't care for comfort. It reveals truth slowly, one discovery at a time. In 1964, Cygnus X1 was detected, a region of space where nothing visible existed. Yet immense gravitational energy pulled at nearby stars. Scientists couldn't see it, but they could feel its presence. It was invisible, silent, powerful, and it matched everything Michell had described nearly 2 centuries earlier. Imagine it, a man with a quill pen sitting by candlelight in 1783, predicting a celestial monster that would only be confirmed when humans could launch telescopes into orbit. That's not just genius. That's prophecy written in ink and faith. Today, black holes are among the most iconic symbols in astrophysics. We can now hear their gravitational whispers, watch them devour stars, even see their shadows. As in the famous 2019 image of the black hole in galaxy M87. When that photograph was released, that blurred ring of fire surrounding a perfect void, the world gasped in awe. But somewhere in the silence between those gasps, Michell's ghost smiled. The invisible had finally been seen. It's almost poetic that the man who first saw black holes never saw fame. No portraits of him survive. No statues bear his name. And yet, his ideas carved the first mapped award, understanding the most mysterious phenomenon in the universe. His discovery wasn't a spark that flared and vanished. It was a buried ember that burned quietly for centuries until time itself brought it to light. We often talk about great scientists as visionaries: Galileo, Newton, Einstein. But John Michell stands apart, not just because he was first, but because he worked in the darkness and trusted his vision when no one else could see it. His was a faith that science rarely speaks of, faith not in religion alone, but in reason, in curiosity, in the belief that the cosmos makes sense even when no one's watching. There's a certain loneliness in that kind of genius, to spend a lifetime uncovering truths no one is ready to believe. To die knowing your greatest work will likely never be understood. And yet, there's also something profoundly human in it. A reminder that every idea, no matter how small or ignored, carries the potential to reshape the universe. Because in the end, the universe remembers. The black holes Michell imagined still sit out there in the endless dark, swallowing stars, bending light, warping time itself. And every time a telescope captures their shadow, every time we stare into that cosmic abyss, we are, in a way, looking through his eyes. So the next time you see an image of a black hole, remember the man who saw it first, not with a telescope, but with pure thought. The priest from Yorkshire who stared into infinity and found a secret that waited 200 years to be believed. And that is why John Michell's story matters. It's not just a tale about science. It's about how truth survives even when the world forgets. It's about how genius doesn't always echo in applause, but in the quiet persistence of an idea that refuses to die. Beat, if stories like this move you. Stories of forgotten minds who changed the universe. Then don't let them vanish again. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon, because there are countless others like John Michell, scientists whose names were erased, whose brilliance was buried, and here we'll bring them back into the light. Let's make sure history never forgets them again.